Good evening, everyone, and welcome. We are the Owatonna School Board. This is Monday. It's February 8th. It's 5:30. I'm going to call the meeting to order. It's our work session tonight. Eric, our attendance?
All board members present along with our student rep.
Here. Would you all please rise? Let's do the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First up tonight would be to approve the agenda as it has been presented. Motion. We have a motion?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor with an aye? Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. First item tonight would be a presentation from Lincoln Elementary. I'll turn things over to Mr. Elstad for some introductions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, members of the board. So this is our one of our annual building presentations at tonight's work session, amongst other topics. So we've asked Mary Hawkins, our principal at Lincoln, and a couple of her staff to join us tonight for the meeting. So at this point, I will turn it over to Ms. Hawkins. Thanks for being here.
Hello. See.
And if you'd like to, just as a matter of protocol, if you'd like to take, when you're speaking, you can remove your mask and then put it back on. I know it means a lot of this going back and forth, but sometimes it's just easier to hear. So thank you.
Okay, it's good to be here in person, right?
Yeah.
Well, we are from Lincoln Elementary School, and I brought two of my colleagues with me tonight. I have Brandy Vietz here. She's a kindergarten teacher, and she's a leader on our site team, and she's one of our building technology leaders also. So really happy that she's joining us. And then I have Kelly Kruger on this side. She's our teaching and learning coach, and she has been very instrumental in the things we've been doing in the last year. So we'll tell you more about that. But on the screen, I just have a couple pictures I wanted to share. This is actually Brandy's class on the right, and that's the kids, taking advantage of the new iPads that all the students have and keeping their distance and such. But I hope, it's hard to see, but they are smiling. and as the kids are. When I walk into the classrooms, they are smiling and they are happy to be there. On the other side, we have some outdoor learning, a location that we have. It's one of the many locations we have at Lincoln. We have such great facility and grounds there that we've been able to go outside quite a bit this year. And they're still going out throughout the winter, which is really fun to see these classes take advantage of the outdoor learning. So when the year started, we had 3 goals in mind. And we've been I guess for those of you who have been here, you've probably heard me talk about the same couple goals. One is always to maintain a safe, predictable environment for students, because we know that's how they will thrive if they feel safe and willing to take risks in their education. So we work on that, and we've got some things in place for that. The other goal that we always have is reading and math, and this year we decided that we wanted to just see that kids would make a year's worth of growth, knowing that it was a very unusual year. The third one is just, we had to do that. we did not necessarily want that goal, but that's what was placed before us. And we know that 2020 presented challenges to our school, our community, our world. But we will remember 2020 as maybe a year that we took great leaps in education. And so we want to share with you what we feel were some of those successes or some of the joys that we had even in a very difficult year. So
through our great challenge, finding a way to do school through a pandemic, we wanted to share with you some of the things that the students came up with what they liked about distance learning. we can hear all of the negatives and what did we miss, but we wanted to share with you the things that they enjoy about distance learning. So this is a Flipgrid, and this is a technology tool that lets the kids capture their video of themselves on their device. And it's great for students that maybe didn't want to talk in a Google Meet, or all the high school students that don't turn their cameras on so you feel like you're talking to yourself. This gives them a chance to show their face and say it, but not in front of everybody. So it's a great tool. So here are some of our students.
My name is Peyton. One thing I liked about distance learning is that I got to see my friends on the computer, and I got to see my family, and I got to see my sister learn. But mostly I like seeing my friends on the camera and not just in real life. Bye.
Like seeing everybody and playing the fun activities. Bye. Bye.
Things I liked about distance learning is that sometimes we gotta play games, and if I got stuck on something, my teacher was in a Google Meet. Bye.
My name is Callie, and what I liked about distance learning is every Thursday, I think, we would do a trivia, and that's what I really liked.
Hi, what I liked about distant learning was that I got to learn new math apps that helped me with math, and the books that I have at home, I could read those, and I just didn't have to bring one book from home. I could read about 5 if I wanted to. Bye. We are in a Google Meet with each other, and that we can see people from a long place away, and yeah, that's what I like.
This is Sturgis from Lincoln Elementary, teach third grade here. Distance learning definitely was much better, I felt, than in the springtime as it was in the fall here. Some of my favorite things about distance learning this time around was the relationships that I was still able to have with my students. A lot of these kids come to us not just willing to learn math and reading, but there's those life skills, and sometimes it's even just the coping skills on how to deal with tricky situations. So one of the things that was really exciting for me, and my favorite part, was my one-on-one times that I scheduled with my kiddos, whether it was just getting together on a Google Meet and having a conversation about what's happening in life and how to deal with tough situations, or if it was playing a game of Connect Four against each other, or cards. And sometimes it was just a matter of a couple kids thought it was super fun to be able to show me their room and how they got to design their room and how they got to choose the colors for the things in their room. And so it was a great opportunity for me to spend one-on-one where I had their undevoted attention and they had my undevoted attention to really talk about the things that at that particular moment was their big rock. At that moment, it was their everything, that it was either their happiest moments or some of their saddest moments. And so with distance learning this year and every student having their own Chromebook, and even the fact that we had the extra monitor to be able to see all the kids was much different than last year. Those would have to be some of my favorite things.
I teach fifth grade at Lincoln. I wanted to share a couple of my highlights from distance learning this time. First of all, having each student have a device was huge. That really, really helped. Just to have access to that device and having a common device made this round a lot easier from a teaching perspective. It was also great just to have just the opportunity to connect more with students in one-on-one settings and also small groups, being able just to get to know them a little bit better, but also just connecting with them. And that also kind of leads into my next piece of just having a little bit more availability during the day to really support students when and how they needed it. So some of those one-on-one and small group opportunities that they would seek out, and I could just provide some of that support for them. And I think overall, it was just really fun to look at some of the skills that I try to build in my own classroom, like their time management, just being able to manage different tasks, getting things done, advocating for themselves as learners. And just seeing those skills not only grow but flourish through distance learning, I think was really neat. Just to see them start to take ownership of their learning and knowing what they needed to get done and seeking out help when they needed it. So those are, I think, a few things that were really neat to see in this round of distance learning. And yeah, just wanted to share those with you.
So we were able to leverage technology to include more people in our presentation because Sarah said we needed to keep it small. So that's just, one example of the way we've grown, we feel, in the last year. And I'm going to let Brandy continue with this one.
So even though this has been a challenge, we were also trying to think of the things that kids gained since we were not in the classroom. So instead of the things that we were missing, what did they gain? So our staff came up with all of these words, and the larger the word, the more times more people said it. So technology skills for students, and patience, and figuring things out, and persevering through, how do I make this work, and why doesn't this work, and how am I going to find those answers, as well as communication and being responsible. And we heard Mr. Kruger talk about that as well, the responsibility of I have these things to get done, I need to get them done, and how can I do that? And seeking out help when they needed it and being flexible. So this was an excellent snapshot of what the staff saw people growing and learning in during distance learning.
All right, so this next piece was we actually had a survey that went to Lincoln staff, and we surveyed all of Lincoln staff to show the comparison between how distance learning went in the spring compared to right now. And I think it was overwhelming with the results that we got that distance learning this round was beautiful. It went so much better, and I think there's a lot of reasons that really contributed to that. One of the highlights in the survey when we got some feedback on that was one-on-one technology. All students were able to participate with us this round. That was huge. Everybody was showing up in Google Meets, one-on-ones. There were small groups going on. And kids were just fully present there. We also had the luxury of getting to see our students face-to-face before we did this. So we built strong relationships with our students, which we all know is the foundation of learning at school. So we really, that was such a blessing in advance that we were able to have that, because then we also were able, once we had relationships formed, we were also able to really show students the layout of what distance learning will look like ahead of time before they actually got there. So we think through with the live meets that we had, the small groups, really teachers continued on their schedule, but just in a virtual format. And so when we were in person, it was a seamless transition because teachers had the kids on devices constantly in a way that was meaningful in looking at, learning first, technology second, but we were very purposeful in what we were doing. So leaps and bounds compared to the spring, because I think overall students and staff, we were all prepared to do it. So it was pretty awesome. The other piece that we wanted to report to you guys today was out of the 44 certified staff that we did survey with this, we wanted to highlight, what types of technology tools enhance student learning. And we think about, and I think we have to reflect a lot on what it looked like last year. And when we have this list up, I would say at most maybe 5 teachers across the board use some of these tools. You look at this list now and how it's really transformed what we're doing in the classroom with that initiative of learning first, technology second. Teachers are now using Seesaw every single day. It's beautiful. Screencastify, Google Classroom, Pear Deck, all those tech tools that really support student learning. So leaps and bounds in the technology field, and education forever will be changed because of this.
I think this was the experiment on relevance in education. If we have to, something's presented to us as a problem, we have to learn the tools to get beyond that. So even the staff members like me who have been in education for 30 plus years, we found ourselves learning all kinds of these tools, and we saw young staff members or staff members that were more skilled in technology, they were helping out the others, and it was just really fun to watch people support one another in this area. Okay, so I'm going to move. I have just an update for you now, but so if you have questions about distance learning, keep those in your brain for a minute. And then I'm going to just give you an update on our Discovery program, because this is just another thing that we're celebrating this year. We have a Discovery program, which is a level 3 special education program at Lincoln. We have 2 classrooms. One classroom is for K through 2 students, and the other classroom is 3 through 5 students. We're in about the 4th year of this program, but in the last year, we've just seen it come together. And I just added a little bit of information for you so you could understand how it's coming together. So we have 12 students in the program. We now have 9 of those students that are at a place where they can integrate into general education classrooms, which is phenomenal. I mean, these are students that really could not tolerate being in a classroom with their peers and with an adult managing the space. And now we have 9 students that are able to access some general education learning, which is the goal, right? That's what we want. And so we're really excited about that. The next bullet is students are spending more time on integration, and the program is set up with a point system so that students earn points for how they're doing and how they're managing themselves. And a year ago in January, 44% of our students were on integration. This year we were up to 75% of our students on integration. So that was just a snapshot of a year to year. We also have more students using self-time, which is, it means they have the ability now to recognize when things are kind of spiraling out of control, and they have tools to help them self-regulate and regain their composure so that then they can get back into a place where they can learn. The Discovery staff plus Key Lincoln staff are trained in LSCI interventions, and these are life space interventions, which is they're very scripted, research-based interventions that help students work through conflict. So we have staff in the building, not only in the Discovery program, but outside the Discovery program, like me and our social worker and another EEA, that can pull students not only in the Discovery student program to work with them, but other students outside the program also are benefiting from that. The other thing that is helping with the success of the program is that our entire staff is learning the program. They know the language that is used inside that classroom so that when the students come out, we're using similar language. And it's helping all students be successful, but it's really helping students coming from the Discovery program into a general education classroom to get in there and go, hey, they're using, they're talking my language in here, and it's really helping to support them. And then also we've added a school-linked mental health therapist who spends, I think, 3 days a week at Lincoln, which adds another level of support for students that need that support. I added that picture. You're probably wondering, what is that picture about? And it's because when I was in the classroom a couple weeks ago, without being prompted, I sat down by a student and he had his clay and he was forming something with his clay. And what he was doing that was his self-time. He was regulating himself by forming this clay, and he was able to talk to me while he was regulating himself. And but he had a great story for me too about the black and white clay and why he chose that, because the black and white students are getting along. And he had a wonderful story for me about that. And this is a student who a year ago could not tolerate even me walking in the room. So to go from that to a student that, what I saw that day, like, it just brings tears to my eyes almost. But so we wanted to just share an update on that program and let you know we're making good progress there. And then I'll open it up for questions. If you have questions either about distance learning or our Discovery program or anything else, we'd be happy to answer those.
But there are some questions. Board members?
I have a question. I'm trying to learn all the lingo and
Mhm.
what all the abbreviations
Yeah.
mean, and I'm not familiar with the SLMH.
That's School Link Mental Health Therapist. So
Okay.
yes, sorry about that.
Everybody else is used to it.
No, they probably not, right?
And they change them.
Yeah, it's
And if I can add just a little bit more to that, so
Yeah.
we have a grant with our district that we actually work with Fernbrook, who provides mental health services within our school district. And so most of our schools across the district now have a school-linked mental health therapist, at least some portion of the week. Others have those, like the middle school and high school have a person that is there every day. So again, it's across the district, and it's really, it was a grant that was written probably now going on 5 or 6 years ago that really helped us to provide more mental health services to our students within our schools.
and this is our second year at the elementary level to have
Yep.
somebody in place.
Mary, maybe you can just confirm for me. I think we've heard about this topic before, and I don't know if your building has reported on it or if we've
Yes,
heard.
we came last year and reported on our Discovery
because I
program.
do remember, and I think you really went into depth about some. For me, it was sort of the nugget about traumas that kids experience and how do we respond to trauma. That's kind of. So I appreciate that. I wasn't sure if I was confusing the
these,
buildings, but this was your program. Is this program in other buildings, as far as you know?
At the elementary level, Lincoln is the site that houses the program, but it is there to serve students across the district.
Yeah.
And then our middle school has a program that takes over there, and then also at our high school.
Well, congratulations on those numbers. That's really inspiring.
Yeah, and when we can help support them at this young age, I think we're going to see it make a difference, because that's the best place to intervene is when they're young.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I have a couple questions.
Sure.
So your second goal, I believe, was something along the lines of growth. Have you been able to do any testing as far as reading and some of that, and have you seen any?
Yeah, I'm gonna let my teaching and learning coach handle that question.
Yes, our staff, we actually had collaboration time today. We're during one of our staff meetings today where we actually dove in and really looked at the data and what it's telling us and how we're moving forward. So yes, we were able to get like the screening assessments in, which is FastBridge, to give us more information. Of course, we know that the students are a little bit behind. So the challenge is really picking apart the data to see, well, where do we go next and where do we go from here? We definitely have some, big pockets of things to celebrate at Lincoln, which is awesome. And I think especially at the lower levels, we're finding that, we're just really shifting our focus so that we can focus on the now and what we can do to support students immediately so we can just keep progressing. So.
I mean, one of the things we're seeing across the district is that kids in that K-1-2 range, they probably suffered the most academically because of the shutdown last spring and distance learning. And you can imagine that that's an age where it's tough for them to access things online and so forth. Although our kindergarten team had some good success today that they talked about. But our first graders are behind what we've seen in the past, but I have great faith that they're going to rebound quickly.
And we're also very lucky to also have the support with intervention pieces in there, and we also have reading core in our building, which is beautiful, that we can support the kids exactly where we need to, and we have fabulous teachers like Brandy, that are super responsive to their kids, and we're going to get them back to where they need to be. That's what we do best.
Yeah, we'll do it.
So a couple follow-up questions. So I know at least when my kids were in school, you had like grandparents for education or people come in to help with the reading time. Obviously that now has changed. How are you handling getting additional reading time with the kids or?
Yeah, that is a challenge because Lincoln especially, we had volunteers coming to us. We still are able to access our high school students, so we have YSL students and some mentors coming into the building that way. We do have reading core. We're the only elementary that does have that, so that turned out to be an advantage to us this year. I actually saw one classroom I walked by the other day, and this teacher had thought really creatively, and there was a parent that was on a Google Meet with a student by the door, and that parent was doing a volunteer position with that, and the students were taking turns going out to meet with the parent on the Google Meets. So I think teachers come up with ways to make this happen. We've got a great EA staff also that really is focused on interventions, and Kelly does a nice job of making sure they're trained in good reading interventions.
And I know even our kindergarten team as well, they utilized their, the EAs that were supporting them during that time, and they had one-on-one intervention set up with kids from the start. So kids really gained a lot of momentum after even talking today.
Yeah, during distance learning, they did one-on-one interventions. The EAs were doing that online.
And we had really great attendance for that. There were only a handful of kids that were not at each of their Google Meets with the EA. We've also tried to Mrs. Sturgis, who was in that Flipgrid, her class read books. We're normally buddies, so they would come in and read and do little projects. So they all recorded themselves on Flipgrid reading a story, and then we got to watch our friend read and then respond back to them in Flipgrid. So we've gotten some opportunities to find ways for them to collaborate and have that little extra of reading time in new ways.
Okay.
Sometimes it's successful and sometimes
Could I
not so much.
Can I ask a question about that Flipgrid? Are you saying they're able to read and that at a later time their classmates can go to Flipgrid and watch them?
Yeah.
And respond.
Awesome.
And then
respond.
send them a little message.
Yeah.
That's
And
great.
that has the greatest thing for my kinders. They can't read necessarily like the prompt for what you want. So you can take a video of yourself, like write the prompt, but then say, "Hi, kinders, I want you to do this today." And so they can see the video and then respond to that. It's great.
Wow.
Yeah, there's some. But any other questions?
Do you mind going back one or two slides? There were 8 different types of technology. There you go. Do you mind giving us just the really brief, what does Screencastify do?
Yep, Screencastify is basically how you can record yourself on the computer or on a Chromebook. And so what we do, teachers would record lessons so they could actually see the picture of the teacher, speaking, and then also record whatever is showing up on their screen. So that's a lot of times how, teachers would record instruction and send it out to students if they chose to do that asynchronously for instruction. Do you want me to run through the rest of them?
What are these things?
Seesaw is really kind of a management tool, almost like Google Classroom, and where you can actually post assignments out for kids and they can interact with it. And students can actually do it right on. I know Brandy uses it a ton in her classroom with an iPad where they can do a word sort on the screen, and then they send it to the teacher. The teacher can give feedback to them and stuff like that. Students and teachers can also record on it too, which is a really nice feature of it. Google Classroom was our big management tool where we would send assignments to students and post schedules and post like Google Meets during the week. Google Suite is just our Google Docs and Google Slides, just like we have up here.
But if you can imagine, we had many staff members that didn't know how to link a document a year ago.
Yep.
And now they're doing amazing things.
Yep.
So.
Yep. The next one is Pear Deck, and it's basically a PowerPoint presentation, but it's interactive. So I could send you a code and you'd be able to manipulate it as a student, and I could see your response as a teacher. So, select, question, true or false, and you could actually see if kids pick true or false without showing the entire class. So it's a way for them to be engaged with what you're presenting. Go Guardian is another thing that I feel like a lot of our special education teachers really took advantage of. So basically, you can kind of see what's happening on a student's Chromebook. So if the SPED teacher maybe was sitting here, noticed the student got stuck on question number 3 because he can see his screen, now I know I can send him a quick message. How's it going? Do you need a little help? I'll support you in this way. So that's been a fabulous tool. Flipgrid, like Brandy had discussed earlier. Jamboard is basically a big whiteboard that has a bunch of Post-it notes on it, and you can interact. So we can collaborate. If we all have good ideas, we can put Post-it notes electronically on a board. There's lots of other ways to, to use Jamboard as well. Teachers created even board games that students could manipulate and play together, which is very fun. And then Flippity is just an extension that we can use, and that just uses basically all of the Google Suites, and it creates games for people to do. They could spin wheels with student names on them to call in a student, or play matching games that were a little more user-friendly for kids. So these were just some of the great tools. There are tons more that our teachers have utilized, but these were the hot ones.
Do you have a favorite tool?
Seesaw is phenomenal, and we were so lucky to get the paid version, because then we were able to send work back. If somebody gave you something and didn't do it, but turned it in, you can send it right back and say, oh, let's try that again. Or you can interact in other ways and invite parents to be able to see all of the things that are turned in. So wonderful for the iPads and for the kids. Google, all of the slides were a little more challenging on iPads. It didn't resize them well, whereas Seesaw was seamless for the K1 students, and so it was really, really effective.
And Seesaw is more kind of used as like an online portfolio for kids. So next year, now that we have the premium version, next year we can actually see their work from last year, and it carries over, so we can see the progress along the way too. Yep.
But that very first one, that Screencastify, I would be the very first person to admit that I love YouTube. But I love YouTube for the very simple reason that as it's going along, if I'm trying to learn something, I can stop and back up and replay that part that I got stuck on. Whereas if I'm in the classroom, my one chance was back in our day.
Yep.
Your one chance was what you heard in the classroom, and once you go home to do homework, you don't have that fallback to go back and say, I got to watch this again. I think it's fabulous.
And if there was a student that, say, couldn't find an assignment on Google Classroom, a teacher could take a quick screencast and say, oh, I'll show you where to find it. I'm going to navigate it right here so you can see my screen. You know exactly what to do. So it's been beautiful.
And Kelly uses it for teaching our staff.
Yeah.
I mean, she uses it frequently and pushes out a video so that they can see how to use a tool. I use it to record weekly messages to the kids. Now we have a 5th grade student announcement team that instead of doing, over the intercom, all the announcements, we have a group of 5th graders now that will film a Screencastify with the announcements for the week. And then teachers can play at any time that it works in their schedule. So we're utilizing these tools in person, and we want to make sure we'd rather be in person, but we can navigate the distance. If we need to do that again, we can do it, but we are.
We're not going to have to do that.
No, we would rather not, right?
And I think the biggest thing with all the technology pieces last spring, it was all about, we're trying to use all these tools to, try to engage kids. And I think this year especially, we're taking these tools and we're saying learning first. How do they enhance learning, and how are we incorporating those with our kids?
Yeah.
So.
You have one more question.
Yeah, just one follow-up. And you kind of alluded to it, but are there any here that really stand out as tools that you will most, like 3 years from now, if I say, or let's say 2, because I know technology changes, but are there some of these that even when we're all back together, and the kids are back in the classroom, I mean, some of these will probably fall away in terms of their usefulness, or maybe not. I guess that's what I'm interested in. Which ones have some lasting value, or do you see integrating a year from now?
I think they all do.
I think most of them will stay. Even back in person, teachers are still flipping lessons, and they're still recording themselves and sending it out to an independent workstation. And kids are doing it on Seesaw. They're using everything, and I think they're here to stay.
And these tools support our small group instruction, because now the students can do something that's productive on their device while the teacher is pulling a small group. So it's helping with some management things in the classroom.
I have one more. Do the kids log on to something? I mean, You're not sending this through like an email or
No,
something?
no, they log into their Google Classroom, so every student is a part of a Google Classroom, or every classroom teacher has a Google Classroom.
Right.
And we set that up last spring. But then even this fall, when we came to school with new students in the classrooms, that was something we did immediately, first week, just in case we had to go to distance learning, and
So it's sort of like Zoom meetings.
It's a platform that you would log into, and once you're in there, it's like
Almost like a website.
Yeah,
Like
it's
where
almost
you're
like a website.
You're
Yeah.
going to the website,
Yeah.
you can navigate and find the things that you're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And if there's a live session going on, the teacher could post it in there that 11 o'clock or whatever time will be a live session with the link for them to go to. Yeah.
Anybody else?
Well, first of all, I can't tell you how much joy I have just seeing other people, and you can tell from the engagement of our board, we're so kind of just
Are we your first live?
We had one previously, but we're just, the board, and certainly including myself, are just so overjoyed to see people and hear about things happening in the classroom, because there's so many things that appear to be lemons for us, but there are so many ways that we've made lemonade with that. A couple of things that really stood out to me. In the Wordle, Brandy, that you described, there were two words, perseverance and patience. Those are mindset words. Those are mindsets. And our staff across the district, not only Lincoln, has established a mindset around persevering and what's next, right? We're going to get some lemons. We're going to make lemonade out of that again. So thank you for having that mindset. And that transfers right to your update, Mary, on discovery, which is your perseverance of your staff to walk through those really kind of difficult steps at times, has prepared an environment where all kids feel comfortable and they feel like they can make progress. Congratulations on that. And the last thing, Kelly, I love learning first, technology second. Because that to me also frames our importance with relationships, which you stated, that leads to learning. And then with the technology supports the learning. But the other thing that we've learned as administrators is we should probably be asking our students and teachers more what technologies you need, because sometimes we throw all these things and say which is going to work, but it's the fantastic educators that come out and say, here are the tools that are really working for us. Let's get really good at these. So thank you for your work. I couldn't be more proud. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you all. We appreciate it.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
We will move on. Item 5 tonight, which would be the high school project update. I know that we have representation from Wold Architects. Paul Aplikowski is here, and as he and Bob are coming in to get settled, we'll turn things back over to Mr. Elstad for some continuing introduction.
Thank you. So as Paul and Bob are being seated here and cleaning the spaces so that they can manipulate the tables, we've reached some critical points within the high school, the new high school project. And as they'll probably discuss, we've reached a point where we are now really looking at the finalization of design, getting into now the construction documents where we're ready to start turning the page and allowing construction companies to look at our plans. So that they can start making bids so we can move this forward. So I don't want to go any deeper, so I'll turn it over to you, Paul, to get us going, or Bob.
Are we queued up?
I think we're get on there somewhere.
Should be on the very bottom there, one of those Chrome apps maybe.
The PDF.
PDF.
At the PDF one, I'm sorry.
There you go. Okay.
There you are.
Perfect. Well, thank you for having us in tonight. Seems like we were just here. We're going to go over, Deborah, you're going to get to see this for the first time. The rest of these folks have seen a few of these, but we are at the stage, and I think Jeff just talked about it. I wasn't listening carefully because I was sanitizing everything down, but we are at the point where design has been turned over to construction managers, Kraus Anderson, and I believe our project is on the street right now. People looking at bids and getting things ready. So what we want to do is give you a view of a presentation of kind of where we're at. There'll be some new renderings today that you guys have not seen. The plans kind of all look pretty similar to what you saw the last time, but I think this is just going to be something special to see. And now we're ready to take that next step moving forward. So Paul, I'll
All right,
turn
thank
it
you very
over to
much.
you.
Yes,
You
we're
bet.
excited. As usual, we'll start off a little bit with some process and background stuff. Just to remind everybody that the high school is designed around 1,600 students. That was what the whole referendum was based on, so that's stayed true to today. Our tally for square footage is about 317,000 square foot, and one of the good things, one of the strokes of luck that you had is you passed a referendum at a pretty competitive time for construction, and now are in a down market, and so we're really, I think you're going to get an amazing school because just you hit the jackpot with bid conditions. So I don't want to jinx anything, knock on wood, it's not done yet, but we're pretty optimistic that things are going to work out well. And then you can see we just listed some of the spaces, some of the scope. So I'm happy to report that I believe we've fulfilled all of the promises of the referendum. There's nothing that's been left out, and as we'll talk about, we've spent hundreds of hours with your stakeholders designing the building. The heart of that was the core group. That was the group that the district asked to come together with us and collaborate on design. We met several times with them, and they helped develop the whole philosophy of the building and was our collaborator through all that. And here you can see just the members of that core group that stuck with us through all those meetings. And then there were a couple of subcommittees for specialty areas in the building, and I think, Bob, you were going to talk about them a little bit.
Yeah, so what we did is we took the core committee, and then we thought that we needed to have a couple more subcommittees. So we added a lot of people, as you can see there. So we had a performing arts and music subcommittee that went out and did some tours of other buildings throughout the state and came up with what our music department would look like, what the performing arts center would look like. And then we had another one with physical education and athletics subcommittee. And we did the same thing there where we went out and looked at Stillwater, we looked at Prior Lake, we looked at a bunch of other schools as well. And they really took what the core committee had here, kind of broke it down into their own areas. And then what we'll talk about, or Paul will talk about here in a little bit, is once we got through that, then we went into user group meetings, which was people that are actually going to be inside different areas in the school. So fulfilling what Wold talked about, we want to hear from people, and not just our staff members, but our community members as well. And I think we did a really nice job going through and listening to core committees, subcommittees, user groups, students, a whole plethora of people. So.
And then following the core group meeting, they really help us get the big concept of the building and the floor plan established and relationships between spaces. And then we go to a whole nother set of input meetings we call user group meetings. And that's where we take individual spaces within the building and sit down with the stakeholders that will be in those spaces and really work through all of the function of the room. So on the right is an example of that kind of drawing. We have that kind of drawing for every room in the building. We met with most of those groups 2 times, some of them 3 and sometimes more, to work things out. But we go through excruciating detail of, what kind of furniture you have, what kind of equipment do you have, where are the light switches, how do you want the lights to operate, and go through all of those things for all of the areas of the building. So we appreciate all of the time and work that they've put into that. So we tallied up over 85 of your stakeholders at the high school were a part of those meetings. And we had over 125 meetings with them. So you can imagine that's a lot of commitment.
Jumped out to me was the 10,000 people hours. You don't think of it until you start doing the math, and they were fun. I hit almost every single user group meeting, and it's a blast to sit and listen to our staff members kind of come in with deer in the headlights look to really knowing what they want in their area. So it's pretty neat to just sit back and listen.
Then we have some of these project commitments, and as you remember from earlier conversations, there are several pages of these. I didn't bring them all back, but these are some of the outputs of the core group, and they really become the guiding light for us as we design the building to keep those in mind. So things like students first, making it welcome and inclusive, always remembering fiscal responsibility is important. All of these things are things that we make sure that we keep at the forefront as we go through design. And then there was this summary slide of those things. So, we take these as sort of criteria.
Mm-hmm.
We're now going to show you what we believe the building will look like with our computer renderings. And I truly believe that we've done a good job of meeting all of these requirements and hope that it's going to be a great building for the city to come
I think
in the
Paul
future.
Wold has done a great job, not a good job of hitting all those priorities that came out of those subcommittees and the core committees to give us what we're gonna see next. I think you nailed it. I'm pretty happy with what we see so far.
So this is the site plan. On the north side, there is 18th Street, organized in a big way that parking is all to the north there, adjacent to the street. I think it will be a different concept for you. I think you're all used to going to the high school and parking in the neighborhood and walking across the street and all that stuff. So you're going to have a parking lot that we believe will meet virtually all the needs, even for assemblies and performances. On the left side there, you can see there's a dedicated bus loop. So there's a spot there for buses to come in and be separate from other traffic, and students can go right into the building from there. On the right side to the east, then the stadium flanks the building there, and that was another important criteria that emerged from the athletics subcommittee. Actually asked us to make the stadium visible from within the building, so we'll talk a little bit about that as we go through the design. And then the balance of the fields to the south there are grass fields or different kinds of functions there. The only one that really has developed amenities is the softball field, which is the central one right under the blue building. You want to point, Bob? You can.
We just
And the rest of those will be practice fields. And then we are leaving some open space across the creek there. So there's going to be a couple of combo ball fields out there, but then there's some open space for future development as well.
These things right here, this is your discus vectors. This is your shot put area for track. And then we needed a practice area for discus throwers, because if we only use these, only 3 kids could be thrown at a time. So this will be blacktop going all the way up to about here, and then from here this way, this will be a 10-foot cement. It's going to be cement, and that's where our discus kids will be practicing. And Coach Egermont's very happy with that, because he can get like 10 kids throwing, and they'll all throw this direction, and this is just going to be open grass. So it works out perfect.
Feel free to ask questions as we go. Otherwise, we'll keep moving. When we go to design a building like this and set you up for a long-term piece of your city, we like to think of a concept that helps influence the design. And we really look to the city of Owatonna itself and its makeup for inspiration, and identified several areas: the downtown, the residential, commercial, and recreational and agricultural parts of the community. And really work to try to figure out how to incorporate that right into the building. So for the commons, the river and downtown, we're really basing the commons or the heart of the building on that idea. We're using some of the colors and textures of downtown and inspired by the river and the flow of the river through the city. And then one of the key concepts is to put what we call signature spaces on display. So there's a lot of those hands-on and educational spaces that are right on display in the commons to try to help build a sense of community around the idea of learning. One of the concepts that came from the core group actually is the idea of residential communities, or they call them cul-de-sacs. So many schools these days are built around some concept of a pod, and they likened those pods to a cul-de-sac basically. So it's the quiet spot at the end of the streets where you can gather and get things done and meet people. And so we really try to invest more of that residential feel and the idea of collaboration at the end of the cul-de-sac into the design. And then, of course, recognizing the important commercial parts of the building and your community. So that really focuses on the pathway spaces and trying to put those on display, manufacturing, and having some great assets for that, and exposing kids, even if they're not in those programs, to some of the things that go on there. And then also trying to recognize some of the great natural amenities and the outdoor parts of Owatonna. So the athletic and performance area are really kind of themed around that part of the community. All right, so then this is the first floor plan. It's pretty complicated. I'm going to do a real high-level overview of it so we keep moving. But it is a 3-story building. Primarily, the 3 stories are to the left and bottom of this plan. The auditorium and gym are 1- and 2-story spaces as appropriate. You can see the building is organized around that commons in the middle. So that's the central gathering space, and also functions as the cafeteria for the building. The administration there is right adjacent to the door. There's a secure vestibule. Everybody will be screened before they're allowed into the building once school starts. And then we start with the different departments. So the first floor has about half the science department on it. So there's science labs there. And then as you go around that hallway, you get into a lot of pathway and hands-on and manufacturing type spaces. So we have 2 color and arts labs. We have the business wing down in the corner. And then the large bay woods and metals, as well as the classroom across the way, really comprise what you might have thought about as industrial technology, but really the hands-on in engineering and manufacturing pathways. Then as we continue around, the gray there is the loading dock and boiler room areas of the building, which is adjacent to the servery, which you can see sits on the commons, so that's adjacent to where students eat. Then the auditorium shares the corner of the commons, so the commons can function as a great lobby space for performance events. Then there's a hallway that connects you down to the other major entry of the building, which is the activities entry. You can see the music department flanks the back of the auditorium, so they have great access to the performance space. And then all of the orange space on here is athletic and phy ed space. So we have 2 sets of gyms, so a 2-station gym that turns into your performance game gym, and then a 2-station auxiliary gym, so a total of 4 basketball courts or other courts. Then to the right of support spaces, there's locker rooms, the training room, student lockers for phy ed, and then a new wrestling room down on that end. To the north end of that block is some fun stuff. So another piece of criteria that we got from the athletic group was to make all of the spaces like concessions and bathrooms and all those things accessible both for inside activities as well as outside. So we've worked very hard to have those things right on the seam between the stadium and the gyms. So those toilets will have doors on both ends that you can choose to unlock to make those accessible. And then, as you all know, the community has come together. Your foundations have come together to fund an addition to the building in that foundation room. So that's something that wasn't part of the original referendum, but through their generous support, we've been able to add that to the building. I will touch on a little bit too, outside the activities entry, we have that area labeled Plaza. And so you'll see some renderings of that. It's a great area out there for gathering and orienting and feeding people into the stadium.
Can you remind me again where like the visitor locker room is? So like if you've got football
Yep,
whole way.
I can help you with that. So we have one side will be boys and one side will be girls. We have this designed. So let's say we have 2, we'll go with basketball just because that's going on right now. So we'll have a varsity locker room here, and then there'll be another varsity locker room here, and then there's also a changing room right here. We have it worked out so we could put the girls varsity here and the visiting girls over here at this one at the same time and have them so they don't have to be together and see each other. They can go in different doors. And that frees up this side over here because a lot of times what happens when you're having activities, the boys have to get out of their locker room because the visiting team comes in, and now we play at 4 o'clock or 4:15. There's games going on, so it's really hard to get practices done and showers being taken when you have girls waiting to get into those rooms. So really, sometimes they don't even use locker rooms in our current school. They may use a small group forum, or they might use a classroom, and then they work out there. One of our criteria was designs that we could have 2 teams of the same sex in the same area, but not have to be right next to each other. So there's locker rooms, or there's showers and facilities for our teams, and there's also facilities for the opposing team that we can lock off and they don't have to interact. So good question, yeah.
So we'll move up to the second floor then. So the second floor, we'll start over.
Deborah, do you have a question?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I could see on that first floor where you have toilets or restrooms there. Where else on the
Right
first
here.
floor?
There's another set right there, and another set right here, and another set right here.
Are there elevators?
There's an elevator right there, that white thing. See that one? And then there's another one right here.
Okay.
So if you're gonna come to a basketball game or volleyball game or something in the gym, you'd come in here, you go through this door here, you go up to the next level, and Paul go to the second floor. And then you'd come up right here, and then you'd come right back, and you could get right onto the walking track. Or you could just come in the front doors and just come straight onto the floor. So this is the walking track that we'll talk about in a second. We will top load our bleachers, so you can walk onto everybody's gonna come up either these stairs or these stairs to get into the gymnasium. and they can walk around and then get onto the bleachers here to watch the game. Or you can come in these doors right here and come around from the backside and get onto the bleachers as well. So. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Well, Bob, do people have to walk on the track to get to the bleachers?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So the track isn't in use when
No.
games are happening?
Well, actually, it probably will be, because I can guarantee you there will be people standing
Right.
around watching, and that happens because we go to
Walking.
Lakeville. Well, they can walk if you want, yeah, and I know
Pacing
I
around.
know a parent. I do know a parent that does that goes around and paces. Now they can walk and watch a game at the same time.
Right.
So yeah, it'll be open.
Okay.
It'll be great.
What's the penthouse?
Huh?
What's the penthouse?
That's a mechanical house for HVAC systems. That's Mr. Elsted's office.
Yeah.
He's right there. You see how big that is? All right, go ahead.
So we started on the athletic side. Well, we'll continue that. So there's that upper level track that goes around all 4 gyms. And then there is a brand new weight and fitness area, which is going to have all new state-of-the-art equipment in there. And then there's a classroom up there for health, for Phi-Ed Health. And also as an additional space for activities. So you might have, depending on your event, you might have a team actually use that space to home base out of or something like
This
that.
will be
So it gives
pretty
you more
neat right
flexibility.
here. You walk up the stairs, and this is an open area. So there's a little bit of a wall here and maybe a pillar, but this is going to be kind of open where the fitness room and the weight room can kind of flow out to it. Or if there's things, booster clubs selling things, they can set a table up right there. And it's going to be a pretty neat area, I believe.
So then continuing around, the auditorium there is shown in the dark red. There is a kind of a bridge that connects that. So the auditorium doesn't really fully have a balcony, but the back of it slopes up quite steeply so that it gets to the second level, which improves sight lines. And there's a way to get there from this area too. So that again is the elevator access to the back of the auditorium. That of course sits on the commons, which is shown in the light blue with the X there. And then the academic space wraps around that commons on the second level. So we have the other half of the science department. In yellow there is the student services area, so that's counselors and guidance and things like that. The core group asked us to put it there to help connect it with the student body, so it's sort of in the middle of the building, in the middle of the floor, more connected to student life.
Our equity coaches, ELL, is going to be right here in this area also.
You will also see a number of places where it says special ed on there, so special ed is spread throughout the building to give them a least restrictive environment and incorporate them with the rest of the population, the rest of the students. And then the English department is the other department on this floor, so that flanks the media center in the center of the space, and that media center, again, is kind of a signature space on the commons. It's open to the commons and on display there.
Say, Paul, is it correct to interpret that? So I see the light blue, which is kind of the commons and the hallway. So all of that is essentially open to the ceiling, right? There's no second floor.
Correct.
So it's like a little bridge from over to the auditorium on the second floor, is that right?
That's correct, yep.
This will be a 2-story ceiling,
Right.
correct, Paul?
Mm-hmm.
And this will be a 3-story ceiling.
Okay.
I flipped through this actually this morning online. Is the media area now what we would used to have called the library?
Yep.
Okay.
So this will be the media area here, and this room right here is going to be what we're calling the book room. That's where our books go. So this area right here will be the desk for the media specialist. And then the kids can come in here, they check their books out, and then they can come back out to the media area. And you'll see some photos of it here in a little bit.
And brace yourself, because I don't think they'll be called media for long either.
Yeah.
A lot of them we're calling learning commons. With the idea that media is ubiquitous, it seems silly to have a space to house that stuff anymore, right? So that is another space. All of the spaces in the building are really designed around flexibility. It's like, how can we make it do as many things as possible for you to flex and be resilient into the future as things change?
I'm just laughing because in the 70s when I was in high school, there was one computer and you had to be part of the computer club to use it.
Sure.
Yeah, times have changed.
Then the third floor is again 3 more basic academic areas. Each one of these are those cul-de-sacs that we talked about before. So this is social studies, math, and then world language. And then in the darker green, you can see some of the signature spaces. So the art labs here again and the digital studio are on the commons and have a view out to the commons and a view back in from the commons to, again, put education on display.
You want to talk about the staff rooms?
Yeah, each one of the cul-de-sacs or learning areas, learning communities has a staff area too. So a big part of the philosophy of the building, which obviously is, again, made to be resilient, so you can adopt different philosophies as you move into the building into the future. But the idea is that within those learning communities, teachers don't necessarily have a room assigned to them permanently. They have a set of rooms that is assigned to their department. And we're instead of having a desk in each room, we're giving them a professional staff office to collaborate within. And the idea is the classrooms are not all designed the same. They have slight variations in them and allow different things to happen. And I think we're coming up to that. Yeah, we'll come up to that. So this is a zoom in to one of those areas, just as an example. They all have some similar features, but you can see there's a staff area. Outside that staff area, there's a table, kind of a stand-up area that's set up. We call it the porch. So that's a place where students and teachers might collaborate during prep hours or other times. Then the heart of each one of these is what we call a flex space. So that's meant to be a learning area. One of our big goals is to try to minimize the amount of hallway that you have in the building, which I think is one of the curses of your existing high school, is it's got miles and miles of hallway. We're trying to turn all of them into learning spaces. So we call that flex space. Then around that, there's various numbers of classrooms depending on the department that they're in. And they all have a little bit different features. So number one, as Bob's pointing to, is more of an enclosed classroom. So it's got a door, it's got some visibility out to the middle because that's important to supervise those flex spaces. Classroom 2 is really a 3-sided classroom. So that is on one side completely open to that central space. But it also has an operable wall between it and classroom 3, so that can be opened up and turned into a double classroom space. And again, there's several of those within the building, and so that gives you a lot of different options for a larger group. And then 4 and 5 also have that operable wall between them, so those can be opened up to each other as well. But they also both have more solid walls out to the flex space.
Solid walls, but these are glass.
With a lot of
So that they'll
visibility,
be able to
right.
see.
And then one of the big things that changes how these work, each one of the cul-de-sacs is its own sort of security zone. So there's doors at the end of that, and really it's a quieter space. So when you think of hallways, don't think of these flex spaces because they're really just a sort of the area outside your classroom, and there won't be a lot of traffic out there from other places. And so we think that's going to make it a really great learning environment.
Paul, I guess I have a question in terms of security since you mentioned those doors. I mean, are each of these pods sort of designed that if there was a need for whatever reason, that those can be closed for security purposes?
Yes. Yep. All of those main doors are all on electronic control, so they can be locked down from the office or from other places in the building if you go into lockdown. And then those points are hardened.
Can you go back one to the third floor? A couple. Yeah, so you'll see, where are we at here? So these will be hard right here.
Yep.
That'll be hard there. Coming up the stairway, those will get locked. These stairways will get locked here, so if people are in the stairway, they won't be able to get through.
So what we attempt to do is create a zone that's secured in there and capable of locking down your students. But then by doing that in a little bit bigger zone, we're able to create more visibility within there, which is better for all. I would say it's better for all other security. All the things that happen day to day in a school that you have to worry about, all that visibility is a bonus for those times.
I have another question. You're saying number 2 is like an open classroom?
Mm-hmm.
That there are doors on each end of it?
Right here, this is an operable wall here.
Yeah.
And then this will be just wide open. So you'll be walking down the hallway and you can walk straight into a classroom.
Oh, I thought maybe you were saying that
This one?
that was a doorway there.
No, this is a brick wall.
Those are
Good, that's
and those are
Windows, yeah.
windows outside. Yeah.
No, we don't want you falling out.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And then, as I said, each area has some of the special ed area located within each one of these learning communities.
So when he talked about cul-de-sacs, you can see you're coming down the road, and here's your cul-de-sac right here, and you got houses basically on each side of it. That's the teachers kind of came up with that, which kind of makes a lot of sense.
How thick will that glass be?
For the secure doors,
Or for
the security
like this stuff?
of them in the classrooms, yeah.
those classrooms will be, that typically has to be 3/8 inch plate glass to make those big glass openings. But the point that you're really concerned about is the door up towards the staff area there. That actually will have glass that's made, it's intrusion resistant, they call it. So you can beat on it with a sledgehammer for 12 minutes and not get through it. That's the real point that you're controlling security at.
Yep.
What if you've got a shooter in the room?
Then there are multiple ways out.
Then our Alice training will take over.
Okay.
All right, so let's get into some of the fun pictures. So this is a computer rendering of the main commons area. In this view, we've just walked in the front door, and if you want to follow along, there's a little map on the left side there. That red dot is where we're standing. We are looking back towards the south.
Yep.
One of the great features of the commons is the learning stair that's back on the right side. So that's a stepped area that students can sit, hang out, and becomes kind of an impromptu auditorium. Up above that is the media center or learning commons. And then below that is the area that goes back into the manufacturing and pathways area. One of the defining elements of the commons is what we call these signature spaces. So each one of those colored boxes represents a different program or a different lab space within those. So the nursing labs, science labs, the art labs are all on display there. And then to the left is the stair that goes up to the second level of the auditorium. And then the hallway that goes down to the gyms is also right there. And then a la carte and around the corner there is actually the food service area. So students will enter where Bob's pointing with the mouse there, and then they'll come out on the far side there, out into the learning commons area.
Yep. There's a straight river running through the floor.
Yeah, so again, from our concept before, the idea is to try to create a little bit of a town square here and kind of bring all the life of school and the activity of learning to be a part of that.
This will be 4 pretty large video monitors that are going to be put together, and we'll be able to run announcements, and if everything goes right, if there's overflow in the auditorium, we'll be able to maybe see what's going on stage, and we might be able to see what's happening in the gymnasium if we ever get to that level with the technology. They could put it out there. We'll also be, if you have you got a 5-minute call for, the second part of the play is going to start happening, that'll be flashing up on the outside, and we'll have microphones in the auditorium that will just go out to this area to let people know it's time to start heading back in. So we're really trying to think of everything that we can do and then stay under budget to make sure we can afford it.
So now in this view, we've moved up to the top of those learning stair area, and we're looking back towards the front door. So you can see a little glimpse of the office on the left side, then the outside of the auditorium there where it says the Performing Arts Center, and then another view of those signature spaces within the commons. And then we're also on, I kind of think of it as a bridge, but it's not really a bridge, but it stands between the 2 different sides of the building on the second level. So that really connects the learning communities on either side.
So this will be your English department over here on the second floor. So that's the publishing, maybe the school newspaper and things like that right in there.
Now we're turned around and are looking back into the media center. So you can see it's really designed as a more open and flexible space. It's meant to just accommodate breakout learning, groups coming in. There's a classroom tucked away on the left around that corner. And then that book room that Bob talked about is off on the right there.
Can anybody pick out anything that's going to be kind of unique in the media? Like a big O somewhere?
In the ceiling?
Yeah, the lights. So we took our O from the Owatonna, the one that says Owatonna across, and you'll see it and they made it out in lights up there. So I thought that was kind of cool.
Now we've stepped into one of the learning communities. So this is that flexible learning area in the middle. On the right, you get just a glimpse of that porch area. So that's the staff office area. And then the next door is special education. And then you can see the various classrooms around the edge. So there's a lot of visibility. Where Bob is pointing is that 3-sided classroom that's at the end of the cul-de-sac.
That'd be this one right down here in the corner. Yep.
And on the left, you get a glimpse of what those big glass windows that look like going into the other classrooms. And then you can see the intent is to populate those spaces with some nice flexible furniture. So
Can I just ask a question generally about, I don't even know what norms are, but when it comes to storing furniture, in other words, do schools have a need, I think of the commons in particular and sort of multi-use space, and is there storage in the building that allows furniture and some items to be put away and out of sight or out of, just sort of
Most of those that you saw in the commons are gonna stay there because they use them for lunch every day.
Sure.
But if we were to be doing something else in there, we're not gonna build a space big enough to put those for like a storage facility.
Yeah.
But I would assume we would take those and wheel them around into the industrial tech area and put them in the hallways or in one of these areas that are on the main floor, just to get them out of the way for that program and then bring them back out.
Yeah.
So we don't wanna waste space
I hear you.
to use it just once in a while.
So this is just another view of a cul-de-sac showing a little bit more of the variety of things that can go into those flexible learning spaces and how the classrooms really are connected to that space pretty integrally. So this is not a learning space where an old-fashioned double-loaded corridor school where you close your door and learning only happens in the classroom. The idea is that this all permeates the building, that the classrooms are interconnected with each other, visually at least, so that you know what's going on and collaborate with your peers. Back out to the commons again, we're looking back up at the Performing Arts Center wall. It's the outside of that, and then that hallway that goes all the way down to the end. And what you're actually seeing is the foundation room down at the end of the hallway there. And here is a view of inside of the auditorium. So we're standing up in the back of the house, looking forward. You can see this area, as I mentioned before, we themed around the idea of the natural part of Owatonna. So it's got a little bit more of a nature theme, some wonderful wood panels. It's shown with the acoustic shell put up in the stage. So that's one of those great products that's going to come from Winger that helps focus it for musical performances and project sound out into the audience. That can all get put away and it can be converted into a theater for theatrical performances with full rigging and all those things.
This picture looks a lot better on the computer than it does through
yeah, the pictures are a little washed out on the projector. And then another shot, so we're standing on the stage looking back out at the house. And then this is a fun shot. It's as if you cut the auditorium in half and are looking through it.
The orchestra pit.
Yeah.
Yep, so it shows the orchestra pit. There's a cross aisle. I think one of the requests of the group is to make the space accessible to all people. So there's ample ways to get to a seat without having to traverse a lot of stairs and other things to get into spaces.
Over 800 seats, I believe we have, isn't it? On this
Yeah.
one?
Yep.
Is that space going to be large enough for people with wheelchairs? Do we?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, the code requires now that any space that you have ample opportunity for, and there's a calculation you do to determine the number of spots. So there's several, and they are spread throughout the auditorium. So they're at the cross aisle level and up at the back. So you have a choice of different places that you might want to sit. This is a shot. We're about halfway down the activities corridor there, and this is the entrance to the music suite. So you can see the plan is to have display of some of the memorabilia from music there, and obviously that's all things that they can change over time to show off what they're working on. And then this is a view inside the suite. So we've created kind of a hangout spot within the music department. You can see there's all the music storage in this central suite area, and then the choir, band, and orchestra room all flank that space.
Are those cubbies for instruments then? Is that what those
Yeah,
are?
there'll be doors and stuff on them. It's just the rendering's not showing that.
Okay, I was just gonna say, what,
Yeah,
what about securing
those will all be
Yeah.
secure.
They're ventilated doors to help the instruments adjust.
It'll all be Winger. This is
Got
the
it.
rendering. Just had to show something.
And then those silver doors there, those are also Winger practice rooms, soundproof booth rooms.
Yeah.
Another view looking back out towards the hallway.
That's the ensemble room over here.
About how big are some of these cubbies we're seeing right here?
They vary. So they're some are made for stand-up bases and some are made for piccolos. So what we did is worked with the music department to inventory all their instruments and project what you might need into the future, and then work very closely with Winger, who has planning services, to make sure that we have the right quantity and size of all of those.
These will be able to fit, my kid played the viola, so that some will be viola and then some will be, for like he said, the bass will be the ones that set up, and the cellos will be somewhere else. So the beauty of having Winger in our own hometown, we can just turn this over to them and they'll make sure everything works for us.
I'm sure this has been covered, but can you talk about humidification in that area, particularly on those instruments? I mean, I'm assuming Winger's all over that stuff.
Well, our HVAC system will be all over that. We will actually have one that keeps it at a certain level, so we will not have to be buying humidifiers and changing the water every week. So it will be, our entire school will be controlled by our state-of-the-art HVAC system. Up to a certain level if they need it, or if they need a little drier, we can adjust it.
Most of the building won't have humidifiers, but the music area will.
Yeah.
But it will be climate controlled everywhere. This is now, we've moved down the hallway. We're standing just inside the activities entry. And you can see the plan is to have terrazzo for all these floors. I didn't mention that before. So we have this wonderful logo in the terrazzo of the main entry here. And then we're looking into the corner of the first gyms, or the game gym. On the corner there is another great, I think, innovative, flexible way to think about things. So we talked with that group about ticket booths and how to set that up for the auditorium, and what we arrived at with Mr. Kath was part of this solution, is really just an open counter area. So that works as a ticket booth, but it can also work for a booster club to hand out pamphlets or whatever it is that you decide you want to do. So it's a way to make that a welcoming spot to come in and also give you a lot more flexibility there. As we talked about in the Commons, we have this idea of signature spaces and how to highlight them. So on the corner of the gym, we put this big blue frame around that. And again, I apologize, the colors are washed out. That's will be all more of a matching deep blue color. And then the corners of those, that black thing is a screen. So you can put announcements on there or play game replays or whatever it is that you want to do in there. I guess I should point out in this view too, there you also see there's a big stair on the left and a big stair down the hallway. Those are the two that Bob pointed out before. So spectators for large events, when the bleachers are out, will be encouraged to go up those to top load the bleachers.
Buy your tickets here, then you can head up these bleachers or these stairs, or you can head down and go up those stairs. And down around the corner through these doors is where the elevator is.
And now we're down on the end of the hallway, standing on top of that stair.
And you can see the track inside the windows there. We're on the second level.
And then this is inside the game gym, looking at with the bleachers set up. So we're looking to the back out to the front hall there on the right side.
So if you notice, we have bleachers here. These bleachers aren't out, but they will be out just like those are right to here. And then if you notice, there's bleachers on the ends also, a few, so we can get students in there and maybe the band or whatever, tucking it underneath the walking track. Because the walking track is this blue, the face all the way around, that's the walking track.
And those bleachers on the end, in addition to kind of giving you four-sided seating, which is nice, will also be really helpful for things like tournaments where you don't have a big crowd, where you can have some spectators on those.
And I think Corey wants to use one of these as their staging area for when they have pep assemblies and stuff. Instead of taking up space out on the floor, they can throw a little stage right up on there, and they can be right there. So we did all the AV plugins and everything else in there as well.
Now we're up on the walking track. We're right by the front entry there, looking back out over the gym with the bleachers in the game position. Another view from the other corner.
These black poles are going to be the same color as the ceiling. They'll be white. We just haven't changed that yet.
And then this is the auxiliary gym. So we stepped through that dividing wall in the middle, in the back, and you can see it features a really nice playable floor. It's actually, this one will be a synthetic floor, which gives you a little bit more versatility. The other game gym will be a wood floor. This space also features a wonderful big window that faces south out there, and you can see, it's kind of hard to see on this projector, but there's a husky head in there, and that's actually what faces out to the highway. So that'll be a sort of a fun billboard for the school.
How long's the track?
It's not a regulation track. It's about 200 meters.
Close to 200?
Yeah.
Well, that's pretty good for indoor.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mainly a walking track. The corners aren't. The more we rounded the corners, the more space we needed to take away from everywhere else. So it's not going to be a.
But as a former track athlete who ran the halls of the high school.
I know you did. And I remember one of my neighbors running right through a glass window. We don't want that to happen here.
Yeah, it's an upgrade from that, but it's we really call it a walking track because it's not made to go full bore around the corners. It really is just fit around the gym courts, so its length is not necessarily fixed.
Will it be synthetic flooring too?
Yeah. And here's a view of the new weight room. So you can see we're working on branding in there and a lot of school spirit. And then it also has a view, you can see out those windows, there's a view out to the stadium from this space. And then a view of the foundation room downstairs. And that room is also trying to be as flexible as possible. So it has another one of those partitions in the middle. So it can either be a big space, which could it should very comfortably fit 100, 150 people in an assembly kind of a setup, or can be divided into two spaces, two pretty nice rooms.
Paul, as it's shown right here, you can see the doors that are splitting the two rooms. But then also right here, these doors open up also to the hallway. So there's glass that'll open up, so you have about an 8-foot opening. You can kind of see the opening right there. Does the same thing on this side, but it can also be shut off and have two separate rooms as well.
That space also has doors that go directly out to the plaza by the stadium too, so we could foresee that having kind of a wonderful life during events.
Mm-hmm.
So Paul, listening to the capacity of those spaces, when I think about the double classroom that you were showing us on other wings, it's multiples of that, right? I mean, because the double classroom is designed for about 60 or something, and
yes,
this is 150.
It's bigger than that.
Yeah, so just kind of.
I think if you put 150 in here, you'd be packed.
You'd be tight, but
but like a staff meeting that Paul or that Corey has is going to be perfect for this area.
And there's just a view inside the foundation room, and one of the pieces that the thought is to take one wall and bring some of the memorabilia over from the high school and have that live here. All right, this is just, we're going to go around the outside of the building now, so this is just a massing drawing, and if you can remember, we had some different areas that we were trying to define within the building, so we'll talk about that as we go through the renderings. This is a view from the parking lot, basically, from the north side of the building looking back. So you can see in the center there is the new main entry, and that the glass behind it is the commons, so that'll be a 3-story open space. One of the defining elements that we worked on, again, I have to give credit to Mr. Kath for this, is to have this kind of signature little tower in the front with the O on it. It's kind of like a modern clock tower because it doesn't have a clock in it because nobody has clocks anymore, right? So, but it's a real signature space that I think will become a little bit of an icon for your school. It also is planned to have one of the technologies that Viricon has is the ability to print on glass. And so the midsection, it's hard to see in this, but that midsection Bob's pointing to will be kind of like a stained glass looking thing that'll be backlit there. And we're still working with them about what exactly is going to be the image on there. But
you guys know the assistant principal, Phil Wyken. He's pretty good at graphic design, and he's going to start helping us design some stuff to put in here. And these 3 windows that you can barely see actually the glass is going to come down to about 3 feet off the ground. So it's going to really look like a really cool stained glass piece in there.
the massing of the building is broken up into a couple different pieces. The right side is really kind of more reminiscent of a 3-story building or maybe something you might see downtown. The left side is themed more on kind of a nature idea. So we're working with the functions of the building, like an auditorium doesn't have very many windows in it. So we're using the material there to invoke sort of a more natural feel to things like that. And we'll have some shots that will show that off better. Mm-hmm. A little bit more zoomed in view that shows that tower at the front door.
That'll come down a little bit more down to about here.
Now we're moving around to the west side of the building. So this is the front northwest corner. You can see we continued the theme of kind of signature spaces on the outside, so we have these feature areas that highlight academic space within the building. This is a shot from the west in the bus loop.
Yep.
Again, our effort here is to break the building up and break the scale of it down to help it feel a little bit more friendly and approachable.
Paul, what is that blue section made out of? Like, what is that material?
Metal panel.
Okay. And so, like, over time, will it have to be updated at all?
It
Faded with sun or anything like that?
hopefully not.
Okay.
It is everything wears out over time,
Right. Yep.
and more intense colors are more prone to that.
Yep.
The products that we use specify for those metal panels is called Kynar paint,
Oh.
and so it comes with a 20-year, I think, no fade warranty. So it should last pretty well.
Yeah.
Someday it might have to get replaced or repainted or something like that.
That looks super cool.
Now we're moving around the back of the building, so another one of those blue boxes, and then the greenhouse is there, which I think is not rendering very well. The roof looks like it's missing, but
You can barely see it.
so a beautiful, wonderful greenhouse space on the back of the building, and we work very closely with them and to design a space that's going to work well, and that's connected right into the egg lab on the inside of the building there. And now we're kind of standing on the softball field, looking back, and there you can see that beautiful window at the end of the auxiliary gym. And then the manufacturing and wood shop and all those things are there. And then Bob was pointing to the loading dock in the middle that feeds into the kitchen area.
Was the interstate on this side?
Yep.
Yeah, it's behind us in this view. Yep.
Yep, 14 is back behind us. Yeah, we're standing right here, and it's down below. Yep.
We've jumped back up to the northeast corner now. This is the plaza area outside of the stadium. So straight ahead of us is the activities entry. The music department is to the right there.
Band room, yep.
Yeah, band room's there on the corner. The athletic director's office is right in the corner there to greet people at this door and supervise activities. There's a ticket booth built out in the plaza there, so that's where you get your tickets for a stadium event, and then kind of a gateway that goes back into the stadium there.
So they'll buy their tickets here and then have ticket takers at the gateway. There's a gate here, and then there'll also be a gate heading over to the opposite side, visitors, and I know there's a lot of home people that like to sit on the other side as well, so.
Is there some place for selling concessions?
Well, would you look at that?
So again, one of the criteria that
How's
the
that? That's
activities
pretty good
group
answer.
gave us was to have those things function both for inside and outside. So the concessions equipment functions both for a game or a gym event as well as for the stadium event. And then there's a bit of a canopy built over that too, so you can get out of the weather there while you're getting your popcorn.
Restrooms are right in here, same as the concessions. There'll be trees that are planted in here that don't grow to 100 feet tall. They'll be the smaller ornamental trees. We didn't want to block the view from the weight room, looking out, over the plaza. And then there'll be benches and things like that all in here. It's pretty neat to see what they have coming.
Another fun feature that's shown in this rendering is we were challenged to relocate the lanterns, streetlights that are out in front of the old high school. And so the plan is to put them right outside the foundation room here. So they'll be taken down and restored, strip 100 years of paint off of them and redo them and rewire them.
Mr. Sebring, we'll drop those off at your house once we get them down, all that steel wool and polishing them up.
Where are those located? On the front?
Right in the front of the high school.
They're on the plazas.
They're from the 1920 and 20, or the 21 and 22 classes, I believe.
22 classes donated those.
When the school was built, so, yeah, they're there. Look carefully when you go, you walk by them all the time when you go in the front door. Yeah.
And then this is a shot from the visitors' side bleachers, so across the stadium. The plan is to have a artificial turf field for the stadium, so.
Softball over here.
And then the stadium, the home bleachers have a press box on top of them too. You can see that there. All right, so that's the renderings. I don't know if there's any questions or want to go back and look at them.
You have another group coming in after us, so
Yeah.
Thank you for allowing us to be here.
Thank you for the update.
Yeah.
Great question.
Yeah.
So, having gone to high school conferences, and walked throughout the building to attend conferences. Based on the size of this new gymnasium, I'm assuming we could actually just have it all in one area. I'm sure, probably not the first thing on your mind, but
Actually, it never did cross my mind. But it's a great question. I'd say probably so. We have 2 full-size gymnasiums. I bet you could get everybody in there. So people don't have to go all over. But who knows what, the thing I would say is who knows what conferences are gonna look like, and, cause we still have 3 years before we're in there. So things might change a little bit. I don't know, but the beauty of this school is.
I think you have a lot of options, so
it's
I think
flexible.
you could actually do that in the commons, it's probably big enough. Or the gyms, or I truly believe this building's gonna feel vastly smaller than your existing one, even though it's not that much smaller. Everything is closer together and centered around that common, so I don't think that it will be as hard to maybe have parents go into the learning spaces and meet with teachers there.
yeah. Well, and I'm sure at first everyone's gonna want to.
Well, everybody's gonna wanna see it.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
I think there's another portion of which is part of the learning and part of what parents are seeing is kind of learning on display. And so sometimes going into those cul-de-sacs is going to be critical because they'll be able to have, they'll be showing student work. So there'll be maybe something student literature or student art projects or social studies projects that they've been working on, I think will be critical. So I would guess that, again, we're a long ways away, and I don't know that there's been a lot of thought into that, however, but I think there's some points of that sort of cul-de-sac feel where you can go into the language arts cul-de-sac and really, talk with language arts instructors, see some of the work, and then so people are gonna maybe have to travel around a bit in the building, but that might change too based on parent feedback. I think we're gonna have to try something, see if it works, and then have to adjust accordingly.
And I guess the way I was envisioning it is like the middle school, they have cul-de-sac feel, at least some of the areas, and yet you never went into the cul-de-sac to show your conference.
Yeah, if I were to put my principal hat back on, I'd say doing what he just said and having them come into the learning areas where they're at, because you have social studies already in one spot. You already have math already in one spot. Bring them into where you're teaching and they can see what's happening.
And again, long time away, I'm just.
Right.
It is.
I actually envision that at some point we'll have a mix of both in-person and virtual conferences with parents, right?
I have a few questions. I might have missed it, but I don't remember seeing lockers.
You didn't miss it. No, we didn't. So what we've decided to do, lockers are an interesting animal nowadays. We are not putting in a locker for every single student, for 1,600 students. What we've decided to do, based on feedback from staff members, is to go with enough for the entire 9th grade. So the new students coming in, they'll each get a locker. And then I believe it's 15% or 10% of the rest of the, 15% of the rest of the student body. Because a lot of them don't use lockers. I mean, and if they're not gonna use them, what we didn't wanna do was waste space. To put lockers in that'll never get used, so we use that space for other things that we could really.
What about winter clothes the kids have to wear?
That's a great question, but I remember my kid going to school and he left his darn jacket in the car because they don't want to wear them into the building. Whether we like that or not, we don't have a problem with winter clothing at the high school level. Now, elementaries, when I was a principal, yep, we needed a locker because they're hanging all over the place and they have boots and mittens and everything, but high school kids.
The world has certainly changed. We're seeing that trend all over the place.
Wearing it on their back.
Wearing it on their back, and you wear a light jacket in the winter so you can wear it all day long. I think the important thing is that we are providing lockers for all of the 9th graders and anybody who wants to. So if you're a cold person and have a big winter coat and want a locker, you'll be able to have one. Cutting back is just honoring all the people that don't seem to use them.
How many people will be seated in the auditorium?
Over 800, like 820.
24 or something like that.
Okay, and do you know off the top of your head how many square feet you're allowing for the art labs?
Boy, I'd have to go and look at each one, but they're about 1,400 feet each, I think.
And there are.
I've noticed in spending time working at the high school, you have some kids who are so fantastic at art and drawing. It's just unbelievable.
I think there's a 2D, a 3D, a clay room, and then we also have the digital Fab Lab that they're gonna be using for, the computer arts as well. So I think there's quite a bit more square footage than what we currently have.
Okay.
Anybody else?
Good questions.
It's so much fun to see this because even though those of us on facilities have seen it 2 or 3 times, I always see something new.
Yeah.
Each time you show us.
Yeah.
It's fabulous.
It's awesome. It's looking good.
Closing comments?
Well, and I was just going to add one other thing I think that's important to mention, and Paul noted it. As you saw going into the music suite, you saw some display cases where there'll be various historical pieces, and you saw it also in the foundation room. One of the intentional things, and I've heard from a number of community members that would say, well, where's the OHS museum going to be? Well, the museum is going to be the school, because no matter what part you go into, so when you go into the publishing lab, there are going to be some displays there that have our newspaper and yearbook from years gone by. So it's not an essential location. You'll see the history of the building as you walk throughout. When you walk into the music suite, you'll see Harry Wanger's band uniform and the inventions that really made him and the company who they are. You see some of the pieces when you walk into you'll see the Hall of Fame displayed and things like that within the athletic piece. So you're going to start to see those pieces represented in different parts of the building versus having one carve out where we have the museum. So it'll be kind of a more of an interactive feel, but I could go back to something Bob said. I'm just really pleased, Paul, with the work that Wold has put in. But more importantly, I think it's the way that you intentionally you listened so clearly to the staff that were giving input. And got to sit in on a few of them, not certainly as many as Bob did, but as I sat in a few, whenever there was this sort of comment around, well, do you think you could do this? Paul would say, well, we're going to have to come back and look at that. And all of a sudden at the next meeting, something evolved and the person would say, well, that's maybe not how I thought, but actually I like that idea better. So, Paul, thank you so much for you and your staff putting this together. Thank you for the thousands of hours you spent with our community members. But I also like that you incorporated student input into this high school because I can see the student input kind of showing itself in each of those spaces. So thank you.
My pleasure. And I think maybe it was at the board table shortly after the referendum. I think there was a lot of questions about what the plan is going to look like and all that stuff. And we really didn't know at that point. It really is based on all this input, which makes it very satisfying for us. Everyone is unique and it's really built around your community.
And lastly, I would be remiss if I didn't thank Bob for his enormous amount of time putting in this. It's a lot of work to coordinate all these things. And I appreciate the work you've done too.
Thank you.
Good job.
Thank you.
Great work, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Great work.
All right.
Great name.
Item 6 tonight would be the budget update. Amanda is here and a quick sanitation.
Yeah, we'll get her out. Get out of here.
Invite Amanda in for our 2021 final budget. Sarah is here as well. Welcome. Nice to see you.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Not done yet. Go to that side.
Oh, okay.
It's fantastic to see both of you and have both of you in person.
Yeah, it's good to be here in person, so. So hopefully we don't need a magnifying glass to see this, but I'll go through that on the board. But we had time to go through this presentation on last Tuesday with our board finance committee in detail. So we're going to be here to give it to the full boards tonight. So we're excited for that. As we take a look at the first page here, as I said, we kind of need a magnifying glass probably, but you have a paper copy in front of you if you need it. This is really our fund balance forecast looking forward for the next 5 years. So obviously tonight we're here to talk about the final budget for that 2021 column. So if we take a look at that column, you can see that our revenues as we look at the final budget are coming in around 64.8 million. Expenditures around 64.8 again. So really a balanced budget, revenues exceeding expenditures just slightly. Coming down to that unassigned fund balance at the end of 2021 of 9.26%. So really maintaining that unassigned fund balance, as you know, the board's target is 8 to 10%, so we're right in the middle of that. As we look forward for the next 5 years, obviously there's a lot of pieces to the next 5 years that we may or may not know about, but we've just put some markers in the ground as far as what we do know. So as we take a look, what we've used for assumptions at the bottom there is we've used a 0.5% increase in revenues for the 21-22 and the 22-23 school year, essentially estimating for really 0% increase in state aid. But we have an inflationary factor on our levy, so we're just adjusting for a slight increase in revenue that will come from that, so 0.5% for those 2 years. And then beyond there for 22-23 and out, we've put in, 23-24, we put in 2% revenue increases for those next 3 years. For expenditures, we put in a 2.5% increase in expenditures for the 21-22 and then the 22-23 year, and then 3% beyond for that in the forecast as well. In the 21-22, I should mention, we do have it slated to have another $2 million of budget cuts at this point in that 21-22 school year, as you can see there too. A couple other things that we know in looking at this forecast as we move forward. We are not going to have our Achievement and Integration Grant any longer after the 21-22 school year, so that will drop off in the 22-23 school year. So we've removed $550,000 of revenue from there. And we also know, obviously, as we just talked about earlier, the new high school will be opening in the 23-24 school year. So right now, we just have a marker out there of additional expenditures of maybe $500,000 that we would need at that point. We don't know if that's really where we'll be, but just to know that we have a marker out there as we're looking at our forecast moving forward. And obviously, our current operating levy, which we renewed this last November, goes through June 30th of 2031. And right now, there are no levy increases anticipated in this forecast. Obviously, that'll be something we'll have to plan for as we move forward. And ADMs, we just assumed are going to stay stable as we've seen. I'll talk about it in a little bit as we go on to the revenues as far as what we're seeing this year from the pandemic heading. Do you have a question, Mark?
I do.
Yep.
Just for the benefit of a historical perspective, your assumption item number 1.
Yep.
You're talking about, these are some of the adjustments that we have made.
Yep.
If we were to look back over the last 10 years, on average, we usually had been using about a
1.5% to 2%, depending on. Yep. So that's where we were. But obviously, we know that the state in the November forecast came out with a $1.3 billion deficit. Now we'll see the February forecast coming out in early March. So we'll see what that looks like as we move forward. Right now, I was just actually on a MASBO conference with all the finance directors in the state, and most of us are expecting right now, or budgeting at least for a 0% for that next biennium, which will be set. So obviously, as that changes or anything changes with that, this forecast will change. It's just we're trying to put some markers out there so we kind of can plan forward. And as you see, as we look forward over the next 5 years without any additional revenue sources coming from the state or federal government or our operating levy or additional cuts as we move forward, we do begin to spend down our fund balance quite fast. So obviously we'll have decisions to make as we move forward over the next 5 years as to what that looks like as far as budget reductions, operating levies, those types of things. So as we take a look here at the general fund revenues, as we can see, overall revenue from a preliminary budget standpoint to the revised budget standpoint is increasing about $1.75 million. A majority of that, obviously, as you can see, is coming in the federal sources, and that is because we received about $1.98 million in coronavirus relief funds and CARES Act funding, which has really helped us to be able to purchase some of the PPE, some of the technology pieces and that we've had to put in place with the pandemic. So that will obviously, as Sarah explains expenditures here in a little bit, will come into play as she's explaining some of the increases in expenditures. As we take a look at state sources, you can see that we decreased about $200,000 there. As we look at the general education aid, you can see that decreased about $365,000, and that was really due to the fact that we are 52 students short of where we thought we were going to be when we did our preliminary. And I actually consider ourselves quite lucky as we look at some of our Big 9 colleagues. Some of them are seeing 200 to 300 students less than what they were expecting. So while we don't like to see, our students decrease from what our enrollment is, we are fortunate that we were able to keep as many students as we possibly could. But some families just chose to do homeschooling or, virtual for this year with the pandemic. So we're hopeful as we move forward. Some of those students will be obviously returning to us this fall potentially. So as we go forward, 22 is going to be an interesting year as we project for enrollment. So really we'll have to project as best we can and then look to our October 1 counts for next year to see where we actually land. So So that's where we are right now. And then as you can see, special ed increased a little bit, and that's just simply because the special ed formula floor increases each year for us. So we just adjusted for the additional revenue that will come in for that. So that was another $200,000 there. So overall, increasing about $1.7 million. As we take a look at the next page, and as I just wanted to, this pie chart here, as you can see, 79% of our revenue comes from state sources and 12% from our local operating levy and 6% from federal. So that's just really a good breakdown of where our revenue comes from. So as we take a look at food service here, we can see overall, this one's going to actually be some pretty significant changes due to the fact that we have free meals happening throughout this year. So we decreased our revenue about $700,000. As you can see, we decreased state sources and moved some to the federal sources. Our summer food service program, which all the free meal program is running through, so that's where we get our reimbursements from. That's actually from the federal government side. So we're anticipating another $543,000 in there from what we had budgeted for preliminary. And as you can see, the biggest change in this is really the all other sources, which is $1 million less than what we were anticipating. And that's really due to the fact that we aren't getting any full price meals. We aren't doing a lot of a la carte right now with the pandemic happening. And really what it comes down to is, we don't have all of our kids in school every day eating. If we did have all of them in every day eating, the reimbursement is a little bit higher for our state or the summer food service program. So we might be seeing some revenue to help supplement this. But so once we can get all of our kids in every day, that will actually help us. But yeah, we're just seeing some decreases there as far as that goes. So overall, a decrease of $700,000. As we take a look at community service, really didn't change very much. We decreased about $148,000 there. State sources increased about $66,000. That's just our adult basic ed consortium revenue going up. So we adjusted for that. And as you can see, all other sources went down here too. Really the same type of thing as food service. We're reducing tuition. We haven't taken a lot of the community ed trips that we would have normally taken. Some of our programming has changed due to the pandemic. So we adjusted for the revenue and adjusted that down to that effect. So as we can see, the high school construction fund there going up about $210,000 from what we had budgeted. And that's just really basically the donations that we received from the ISD 761 Foundation, the Owatonna Foundation, and another family for $10,000. To really just put the foundation room in and some other additional donations there. Building construction, and this I should decipher, the OHS building construction is obviously for the new high school. The building construction fund that you see on here is from our 2015 bonds. We have a little bit of money left to spend in that, as Sarah will explain when she goes through expenditures. We are finishing out our OEC project this summer, so there's just some things that are finishing up on that bond that should be done this summer, and then we'll hopefully only have the OHS construction bond moving forward. And as you can see, we decreased interest, essentially is at $48,000. As the one good thing about, we talked about this at the Finance Committee, the great thing, and Paul alluded to it earlier, the great thing about the environment is we were able to sell our bonds for a very low interest rate, and we're in a good bidding market, but the unfortunate part is interest rates aren't very high, so we're not gaining a lot of interest on the funds that we have in the bank right now. So we did decrease the interest pieces there. And then debt service fund is just simply shoring up the revenue to what we actually levied for. So not much change there, just a decrease of $5,000. All right, I'll turn it over to Sarah to go through expenditures.
All right, general fund expenditures are on page 4. We're breaking down our $64.8 million expenditure budget and presenting it in 2 different ways. The top section of the page shows that budgeted expenditure based on what we're spending it on, so salaries, benefits, services, and supplies. And that's really the format that you guys are receiving the monthly treasurer's report in. The second section of the page splits out that expenditure budget by department or function, so you can see what departments are, what the budget is for each department. So going back again to the top, our overall expenditure budget increased by $630,000. The first 2 categories, salaries and benefits, had a decrease of about $1.1 million. When Amanda and I are doing the preliminary budget in May, we have a lot of positions that are open without certain staff to fill them. So we always budget for full family benefits, not knowing what the new incoming staff will take. So this is the budget where we true that up to reflect actual benefit elections. So we see some decreases there because we do budget conservatively on the front end. Additionally, in this section, we have about 7 teaching FTEs that were filled internally that we budgeted as external hires in the preliminary budget, and a few extra classroom support positions that were unfilled. The other contribution to the decrease in this category is, if you remember back to preliminary budget, we talked about an increase in our health insurance premium of about 12%. So the effect of that was we did see some staff that switched from family to single coverage or dropped our health insurance coverage altogether. So that sums up that $1.1 million decrease. The rest of what you're seeing in purchase services, supplies and materials, and capital expenditures for increases all relate to that $1.98 million of CRF and CARES funding that Amanda mentioned in the revenue increase section. So dropping down to the second section where we're presenting expenditures by department, a few of the bigger changes prelim to final budget are in the district support services and regular instruction. Again, here's where you're seeing a lot of those budgeted CRF and CARES Act grant expenses. So that's the increase of about $900,000 in district support services and regular instruction. We have a larger increase in the special ed instruction section of about $600,000. Really there, that's where we have a few of those unfilled teaching positions, and we saw a lot of benefit movement. Additionally, we changed the way we're doing summer school for our special ed students, so there's a small decrease included in that for the summer school timing and staffing. Again, in the instructional support services, the pupil support services, and operations and maintenance, those increases all relate to the CRF and CARES Act grant expenses with offsetting revenue, 2 pages prior. So I think that about sums it up for the general fund. The one other thing I was going to mention is the $630,000 increase from prelim to final budget is about 1% of our total expenses. However, if we back out the $1.98 million of CRF and CARES Act expenditures, we're actually budgeting for about a 2% decrease in our expenditures. Next page, we show expenditures for all of our remaining funds. Our food service fund, overall, we have a decrease in budgeted expenditures of about $250,000. You see a little bit of that in staffing just due to some unfilled positions in our food service staff. The biggest decrease is in our supplies and materials. Again, as Amanda mentioned, we have less kids, we're serving less meals, so we're purchasing less food and milk, and that's where you're seeing a bulk of the decrease in our supplies. Offsetting that a little bit is we had to purchase individualized wrappings, containers, that sort of thing to serve the food safely. So overall, that brings us to the $250,000 decrease in expenses. In the community service fund, we're decreasing our overall expenditures by about $170,000. Here we're just truing up staffing to what we're actually seeing in our community ed programming. And additionally, in the purchase services, there's a decrease of budgeted expenditures of about $135,000. Again, that relates to the reduced trips, community ed classes, programming. So that really pairs with the reduced revenue that Amanda mentioned earlier. We have no budget changes for our OHS building construction fund. And looking at actual expenses, it seems to be on track. The building construction fund, here we decreased the budget a little bit just to budget to spend down the remaining funds in that fund. Hopefully all those projects will finish up soon and we just focus on one construction fund. And debt service, no changes to that budget.
So as we look at page 6 here, that is really the page that will actually be coming to the board then at the end of February for your business meeting to approve. So this is just a summary of what we just went over. A couple of things that we didn't mention on the slides before is we have our trust fund on this page, which is our OHS museum, where the district serves as the trust for that. So we have the money coming in for the museum and expenditures going out for one small staff that we have running that. The health insurance internal service fund, we are self-insured for health insurance, so all of the premiums and the expenditures for claims come through the district, so that is the health insurance service fund. Same with dental, we're self-insured for dental, so we have a separate fund for dental as well. So those are in addition to what we talked about earlier. As you can see, the general fund unassigned balance coming to 9.26. And we look at food service, like I said, the big change there is as you look at that net change in fund balance is, a negative 431,000. So we do have a considerable fund balance there. We had 670,000 when we ended last year, so it is going to be a significant change as we move forward. And we were fortunate enough to be planful of that. We had about, I think Sarah alluded to this, but we had about 7 positions that we didn't fill as we were coming into this year with people changing and not coming back. So we're bringing those back as we come through this year when we need them, rather than staffing fully when we didn't need to, just so that we were helping to stave off some of that loss a little bit. But it's been a very successful program this year, and we've been able to utilize all of those free meal programs to try to reach as many families in the community as we have. So it's really been beneficial. It's just, we just don't get the same reimbursement if we're not having all that revenue come in. So. And then the last page, page 7, is really just a summary of all the changes that went through the general fund, which we've already talked about. So if you want to take a look at that, you certainly can. We're not going to go through it in line by line detail. But I will stop here and ask if there's any questions, but first maybe ask if there's any comments that our finance committee members would like to make.
Certainly.
I'll comment if you have.
So Amanda mentioned that Lori and Deb and I met with she and Sarah last week, and the kind of the overall picture that we get is we're on track. There aren't any surprises. Amazingly, with all the things that have happened, the budget is very solid and didn't throw any loops that we were concerned about.
Right. I would just add a couple things. Obviously, there are challenges to come, and you can see that. But it really is amazing to me when I look at this fund balance, as we've been watching it for several years here. It's far healthier today than I think we would have expected it to be if we had looked at it 5 years ago. I mean, I didn't pull out the paperwork, but just based on having watched it and been in these conversations. So thank you to your hard work. I know that's part of it. The other piece that I think is a real win in here that sort of gets buried, but I am really proud of it, and you heard about it tonight in the elementary presentation, and that is the one-to-one technology that sort of embedded and came through some of that CARES Act, and it's in here, but it's really amazing to me as we watch other districts, they'll go out for levies to try to create those opportunities, and for you guys to be able to find a way to make that work within our district without having to do that, I think is really a win, and you heard it tonight when Washington Teachers Right talked about education and how much better it was when those devices were in every single hand of our kids. So that was a big win for me. So thank you for that.
Ditto.
Questions?
I have one question.
Yeah.
So I sat in on a state meeting where they were discussing us not being held liable for basically reduction in student population. Has that been finalized, or are we still hoping that we're going to be held?
There's still discussion, obviously, at the
Okay.
legislative level about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're all pushing on that. There's 2 components to that. So one, the enrollment that we saw decrease for the 52 that I was talking about, but there's also, with free and reduced applications this year, that drives our compensatory. It also drives our title funding. And so that's the other component of it, is we're trying to push the hold harmless on both the enrollment pieces and the compensatory pieces, as districts saw significant changes because families weren't filling out those free and reduced forms as they had been before, because all of the meals are free this year. So we really made a big push in December, though, to make sure that we were getting all families in, because the deadline was extended to January 4th. And we did get a significant amount. I think we were down about $375,000 when we came into the beginning of December, and we ended up cutting that in half with that last push in December. So we really did a big movement on there, but we're hopeful that the state will hold us harmless on that. And so there's definitely discussions and push from most of our lobbying groups for that.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anybody else?
Amanda, and I'm gonna just echo some of the things that Lori had to say. Your department, you and Sarah, have been very good about being very fiscally responsible. The taxpayers in the school district should be proud of the work that you've done, because during a pandemic, we have persevered. Now, I'm not telling you that we've spent wildly, because we don't. And the budget that we have, quite honestly, board members, is not sustainable, and the community needs to understand that as well. But we have been able to persevere and provide quality educational opportunities based upon what we've got. Now, moving forward, as expenses continue to go up, we're gonna need to go back to our community at some point. I don't know when that is, and that will be for the finance committee to recommend to the board at some point. But hats off to you as a director of finance, and also you as a controller, because you're asking the difficult questions administratively of us to say, how do we do this? But also looking and thinking outside the box about how do we make unique opportunities like technology for our students happen. Now, we could have spent that on many other things, but because of your great fiscal management, we were able to find different ways to maneuver that to make that possible for our students. So hats off to you. Sarah, thank you so much for being that person to ask those difficult questions along the way, which is part of your role as controller for our district. But I couldn't be more proud of the budget that's being presented and all of the things we persevered through, is a common word tonight, but also looking at how do we start to think forward and vision forward? Because, as mentioned, we're not able to sustain this much longer before we're going to have to ask our community for some additional help. Unless the state comes through and says we're just going to start doing inflationary increases, which would be great, because then we're done asking our public for money. So anyway, thank you so much for that.
Yeah, thank you, I appreciate it.
Closing comments, closing thoughts?
No, but I will say, as we look back here, as we're talking about those hard decisions and things that Jeff was mentioning, as I showed on the forecast, those hard decisions that we have had to make, we've made $500,000 in budget cuts for 1920, we made another $2 million for 2021, and we're looking to another $2 million. As Jeff mentioned, that's not sustainable as we move forward, asking for $2 million of cuts each year as we're trying to manage those budgets and those state and federal shortfalls. So I'm as hopeful as Jeff is that we'll see some legislative action on that to help school districts as we move forward.
And we're asking our buildings right now to make some difficult decisions going into next year. Next year's delivery will not look the same as it is, because when we're making $2 million worth of cuts, that means people and programs have to go. And so those are really difficult decisions to make, and no one wants to be in the spot. What has to be seen, though, from our community is that in order for us to try to make this go and to kind of continue to provide the quality that we've been providing, we're going to have to dig deep and find out what our next solution is for that. So thank you.
Yep, thanks.
Amanda, Sarah, thank you very much.
Yes, thank you for having us.
We're going to move on. Item 7 tonight, which is the board forum. Tim, I'm going to start with you. Got anything tonight for board forum?
I do not.
Jolene? No. Daniela?
No, just keeping up with school. Sorry.
Nikki?
Just an FYI, I start my new orientation for Minnesota State School Board training next Wednesday. So hopefully I'll know something after next Wednesday, more than I know now.
Nice.
Again, you have the board's congratulations.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's great.
Laura, you have anything?
Just a quick note. So the MSBA conference, I tried to jump on and off that and learned a few good things, and that was helpful, and had some good follow-up with Jeff on one of the sessions I attended. So I don't know if the rest of you got a chance to dial in at all, but I thought they did a good job, and I appreciated Wool's endorsement and support sponsorship of that closing speaker. I thought that was a nice piece of the whole event.
My only item to add tonight for board forum is that all of you will remember that on an annual basis, there's a city, county, OPU, school meeting that typically takes place, but in the off side of the calendar, there's typically a smaller meeting where 1 or 2 representatives from each of the entities get together. Met last week, and it's just, I don't really necessarily have anything to report as much as it is. It's just nice to know that in a community of our size, these 4 entities do their very best to try and work together and not necessarily in silos. If there are ways that we can save taxpayers money where we work together on things and provide equal or if not better services, it really very amply demonstrated by that.
I have nothing for tonight.
Deborah, do you have anything?
Well, today I met with Michelle Krell, And I set up a meeting with Bob Olson and one with Danielle Tice, yeah. So I'm kind of making the rounds, trying to get a better understanding of what each committee is doing and how things operate, and I'm finding it very helpful.
Great. Fabulous.
That's great.
Congrats. Mr. Elstad, you probably have a few items tonight.
Yeah, just a couple of items. Obviously, legislature is currently in session. There's a couple of things that are coming down the pipe right now. March 12th is a magical date for the legislature because they have to have all of their bills submitted at that point for consideration within committee work. And then, of course, the committees come in and then they'll decide which ones move on to the floor. And then, of course, which ones go to joint, deliberation, I should say, between the Senate and the House. A couple things of note on there. Obviously, the governor came out with his financial proposal, which is as could be expected, is rather large. Certainly, that will be bantered around quite a bit. We're hopeful that they would come out with a budget because on this typical year, they have to leave legislature with an established budget. Otherwise, we don't have any funding for any of our programs. It's expected that the legislative session probably will not end in May when it should. There's a lot of talk that it's probably going to go into June before they figure out how they're going to manage the financial forecasts. February forecast will come out in early March, as Amanda alluded to earlier. So we'll learn more about kind of where we're at with the financial condition. I actually am going to be testifying this Thursday to the House Education Committee, Finance Committee, talking about operating levy renewal by the school board. And again, you've heard me talk about this before. I'm not going to give up the fight on this. It's important that communities understand that as a group of locally elected officials, you have the same rights as your city and county counterparts do to make decisions about renewing levy. So that would be another conversation that will come up that I'll be testifying for. It's House File 292 on Thursday morning. And then just a quick COVID update for you. Great news, cases are remaining lower. We've had 2 successful testing events with our staff now. None of them have produced positive cases from our staff, which is great. And the process, Amy Jo Havelka, our COVID coordinator / health services coordinator for the district, has done an amazing job of really helping us through that. But it's very simple and easy, and you get your saliva and you submit it, and it's gone, and you get your test results emailed to you. So that's been fantastic. Our preschool through 5th grade has had 4 weeks of consistent instruction when Mother Nature cooperates with us. That's been going well, and as you saw tonight from the Lincoln staff, our students are thriving, and that consistency is really great. So I've heard lots of community members asking questions, well, what about secondary? When is secondary going to come back in? We are actively discussing right now about what that might look like. There are a number of factors that need to be considered, and a couple of them I would put out there for the community just to be aware of. One of them is the fact that to bring back our middle level and high school students, social distancing has to be something that's negotiated differently because we cannot fit all of our students in our classrooms. In some of the classrooms that Daniela would sit in as a high school student, there could very well be 30 students in that classroom. And to think that all of them could be 6 feet apart from one another is probably not a reality. So we may have to look at some other mitigating strategies to use with that. The other part would be is that when we set the system, remember that the Department of Education required us to provide a fully online program for families that were choosing that for many different reasons. Within that, however, we don't have the staffing at the secondary level that can cover both a fully online program and an in-person program. So in the event that we were to come back, we would have to take a look at a 4-day week for our secondary students, meaning middle level, high school, and ALC students. The reason we say that is because one of those days, maybe it was Wednesday, would have to be set aside for a distance learning day where our teaching staff could then connect with our full-time distance learners. So again, there's a lot of factors that are weighing in on this. We're having these discussions, it seems like almost daily now, about how we could do this. There's a lot of things that still hang out there though. The COVID variants that are becoming a discussion. Do we bring all of our students back in only to send them back out in distance learning? We've seen a lot of cases though around the country where you're hearing the CDC weigh in on this. President Biden is weighing in on this. And of course, it's going to sooner or later come to Governor Walz about making a decision. So lots of planning in place, lots of discussion taking place. We are proactively as a school district trying to mitigate through a number of those strategies so that when we land on whatever date students might be asked to come back or that we can open up, we are going to be ready with that. So we'll communicate clearly with parents what the expectations are, certainly with students and staff will have lots of input into that decision. So I won't belabor that any further, but we're encouraged. I think all of us want to see our students come back, but it's not as easy as flipping a switch. There are a lot of factors that have to come into play in order for us to make it work, to still offer that quality educational experience for all of our students, whether it be in person or distance learning. So that's it. Thank you.
Before you put your mask back on, do you want to make a quick plug for the virtual coffee with superintendent Friday?
Yes, absolutely. So this Friday, I think it's, I'm looking over at Sarah to make sure I get the time right, 8:30, I think. We have virtual coffee with the superintendent. The only thing that's required of our community members is that they submit an email to Sarah. She will then send them the link to the email or the Zoom meeting that we'll be hosting. I typically provide some just real brief updates and open it up for the community members to really engage with me in a discussion and lift up questions that hopefully I can answer. Some I may not be able to, but at least it's a good way to still connect. Once we move on virtual world, I'm hoping I can do this actually in person at different coffee places around the community. It's important that the school remain connected to our community, but likewise community remain connected to the school. So
Email needs to be to Sarah by Wednesday.
Wednesday, that's correct. Thank you. Wednesday, close of day. Yes.
Thank you. Anybody else have anything?
I have a
Nikki?
question. I know in the past when you would have those coffee things, you would want a school board member part of that. Now that it's virtual, obviously, but it's still.
I always welcome board members. If you want to spend a half hour with us on this coming Friday, all you have to do is let Sarah know and she'll get you the link. Sometimes I think it is really beneficial for board members to hear some of the concerns or questions that are coming from our community. It's just another venue for them to have that forum to visit and maybe get some answers that maybe at a board meeting they wouldn't always get. So,
And I have one other question. Spring break. So I know that after Thanksgiving or Christmas, we had that week kind of distance learning. Spring break is closer than I think we all would like to realize, even though the weather doesn't seem like it. Are you looking at, or are there discussions being had about having a week?
it depends. I think part of the reason why Thanksgiving and maybe more of the Christmas, New Year holiday was one that we were concerned about is because of the concern of family gatherings. The one thing we haven't received guidance on is if families are happening to travel away and then come back, about whether or not there'll be a required quarantine of families. That hasn't been instituted yet by the Minnesota Department of Health. We'll wait for additional guidance as more schools get closer to spring break. They'll probably release some additional guidance on that. But at this point, we don't have anything planned. COVID might have a lot of different twists and turns in store for us throughout the spring. But again, right now, we don't have necessarily anything planned around that.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? With that, we'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I so move.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor with an aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Great meeting, folks. Thank you.